Hello and a very warm welcome one more time. Friday LinkedIn Live, time 12 in the afternoon. I have a very special guest here today. Very pertinent guest considering that we are actually witnessing, the aftermath of climate change. The time to actually sit and decide as to what is to be done is now kind of over because we're in the midst of the crisis of climate change, and I have just the person to speak to about this as to the kind of work that can be done. But most importantly, this gentleman is a SABERA Awardee, and we want to know his journey. We want to also know what inspires him to do what he does. And he's at a very pivotal situation here right now where he can actually help catalyze the work that is required to adapt. Mitigation is, we can't mitigate what has already been done. To adapt, to become resilient to what the climate is now undergoing, or the change that is undergoing, as we can see in the western coast of India today. But as is cursory, I start with an obeisance to the higher power, Shakti. This is an old Sanskrit verse. It's paying my reverence, it's paying my obeisance to Ma Saraswati. Ya kundendu tusharahar dhavala, ya shubhra vastravrita, ya veena varadanda manditakara, ya shveta padamasana, ya brahmachitta shankar prabhutibhi, devai sada vandita, samam patu saraswati, bhagavati nishesh, jadyapaha. So this is an old Sanskrit verse. Like the wisdom of all the ancient civilizations, our civilization also believes in the energy. It believes in wisdom, and that wisdom through dispelling the darkness that resides in our hearts by the light of knowledge. And that's what this series is also all about, talking about wisdom and knowledge of the land and helping catalyze that change, that resilience that is very much required today. And without much further ado, I'd like to introduce my guest here today, Dr. Pranab J Patar. A very warm welcome, Pranab, to our show. I'll give a brief introduction. Dr. Pranab J Patar is an award-winning environment and sustainability professional. 5 years of experience in the non-profit sector, currently serving as the Chief Executive of the Global Foundation for Advancement of Environment and Human Wellness. He has dedicated his career in addressing crucial environmental issues such as climate change, water security, biodiversity, and sustainable livelihood at the local and national levels. Wisdom and knowledge, which is extremely important in the situation that not just our part of the world, but the entire world is actually, trying to deal with. Thank you so much for taking the time, Dr. Pranab, for being here with us.
Good afternoon, and thank you once again for having me here. This is indeed a great pleasure and honor to be here with you and sharing my journey.
I was very, motivated to speak with you to understand the kind of work that you're doing, because literally you have dedicated your entire life towards what now the whole world needs, that wisdom, that whole world needs that knowledge that you've gathered through your lifetime. And so let's start with the beginning. How is it that you got so involved with nature, with environmental sciences, that you actually took it up as a profession? I know you belong to Assam, and Assam is a beautiful, very biodiverse place. So did that have something to do with your inclination towards preservation of nature?
Yeah, indeed. I consider myself very fortunate to born and brought up in Assam, and which has, like you said, has been global biodiversity hotspots. Surrounded by nature, has been bestowed with the nature, the best of the things nature can offer. And fortunately, that has definitely to do something with my choice of becoming an environmental professional in later part of my life. So nature, and plus the kind of upbringing that I've received, the kind of uh, the environment that I received while growing up at home front, at the family front, has definitely helped me and shaped my professional life. And when I now look back, of course, there are ample number of incidents and situations that has been very positively influential in my life. So whether it is the kind of books that I would get to read at my maternal house or even my parents' place, that has left a very different impression altogether. The things about that about birds that I've learned as a young kid, and that also helped me later take up bird watching as something that I have always enjoyed doing, and something that also helped me pursue my master's dissertation, uh, MSc research later on. Yeah.
Dr. Pranab, I'm sorry, I think the Wi-Fi is a little patchy because your audio and video is a little unstable. And of what I could understand, what you were saying is that your influence to the environment essentially stems from your parents and your family, and your father, who was a doctor and would travel in different remote parts of Assam itself, and I think you also mentioned that you picked up a book on birds at your maternal grandparents' house, and that actually sealed the deal for you.
Exactly. Of course, my father's has been a big influence on me. Also, not just as a revered doctor. I categorically say the word revered because he's been loved by people all his life, even till now. The kind of and that worked as a blessing for him and also for us. And the kind of exposure that I've received while traveling with him, because early part of my childhood has been there has been a lot of travel and shift because he would work in the state health services and would frequently be transferred to different places. And of course, that book that I read, in fact, that book belonged to my Masi. And fortunately, and that book I still have with me. And the other day, I was just going through my bookshelf and I found that book, and that brought back, lots of memories.
Memories. Yes.
Yes.
And what was your first exposure to the non-profit sector?
As a young student, just after my 10th, there's this group of friends. We thought of co-founding a group to be able to take forward our initiative. Although we did not have a lot of mentoring or guidance that time, and also because of our remoteness in places where I grew up, essentially in central Assam. Uh, but we had somehow developed a different kind of sensitivity towards and responsibility towards society and the environment, and we formed this group called Morigaon Friends Society, named after
Moregaon is
my
a place where you stayed, is it? That's why
yes,
Moregaon.
that's my hometown. Yes, I
Okay.
was coming to that. And from there on, it all began and organically everything flowed. And although I would not have imagined that time that, this is going to be my lifelong profession or passion, but,
Correct.
something that I picked up as a student or a child, it remained with me forever. And I'm so grateful to all my friends who, kind of took the plans to for this endeavor and form this and of course it later on it became a registered society and NGO. Of course, for about 10 after 10 years or so, we were not able to survive that organization anymore because we all moved to different places and parts of the country and got busy with our own career, but that learning remained with me forever.
And that was also the beginning of you becoming a SABERA awardee. I could see initially, I could see that trophy lying behind you as well, very proudly sitting on your mantelpiece. And
Absolutely, thank you so much.
and of course, SABERA's main aim essentially is to highlight stories like yours, to catalyze the change that is extremely now crucial for everybody not only to become aware of it, but also to start implementing what is required. Now, moving on, in terms of your education, what were your influences when you decided to one thing is of course जैसे बचपन में हम सब करते हैं कि हम ये करेंगे, हम आइडियलिस्टिक होते हैं, बट वो आइडियलिज्म कहीं ना कहीं डाइल्यूट हो जाता है as you move forward. So
True.
how did you maintain that is what my question is.
This isn't it very mistake. I never thought of that way. Somehow I was able to stick on to my passion and love for nature and environment, and that remained with me uh, while I was growing up and graduating from the college. And then when I was about to make a choice, what next? And this opportunity of doing an master's course, an MSc course in environmental sciences popped up, and I traveled from Assam to Pune to pursue my higher studies there. And fortunately, I came across some of the finest people working in this sector, including my mentor, Dr. Arach Bharucha, who founded this institution in Bharati Vidyapit University in Pune. And that's where I got my best of my exposure, academic exposure and training, thanks to all my teachers and mentors there, and everything kind of uh, fallen into
Very.
places. Yes.
Yeah, so I guess all the pieces came together. You're starting
A-
off with a beautiful place like Assam, of course. Now, while we keep saying a beautiful place like Assam or the Northeast, but I think it's one of the most vulnerable as well. Something that now we're experiencing on the western coast of India in terms of the cyclone that has hit. Now, I think floods have literally become a part and parcel of the Assamese people. Isn't that correct?
True.
So before we get to that, I would also want the people who watch this in the future to understand the kind of work that you're doing with the Global Foundation and how important that is.
It is very, very important and relevant. In fact, when this foundation was being conceived by a group of Indian Americans settled in the US, and of course, our main founder, chair, Professor Ashok Kumar, who was so passionate about environment, despite being an technocrat, he thought of putting together his resources and time to build this institution. And so our focus has been around to build climate resilience by promoting, using, and propagating low carbon energy solutions at the grassroots level, uh, restore the ecosystems that are kind of disappearing for various factors, both human made as well as natural factors. And this is, I feel, is the key to remain intact, remain healthy, and remain strong in the face of this calamity that we are experiencing today in the form of climate change impacts.
So if we were to list a couple of key point or key areas that you are both researching and implementing on, what would those be?
uh, See, there are solutions already available. Right in the beginning, you mentioned about it is very important that we look at the adaptation part, look at new solutions, new alternatives that is available to us to be able to sail through this difficult
Correct.
phase. Like the way we sailed through, we were able to successfully sail through the COVID period. And now
Correct.
we have a bigger and more long-term kind of a situation, which is coming in the form of climate change impact.
Correct.
And so, building resilience is going to be the key, whether by means of using, implementing technologies available to us, sustainable technologies available to us, or changing our lifestyles. Like, for example, I can see a lot of developments and a lot of progress around promotion of low carbon energy solutions for cooking and heating. From the conventionally people have been using in Indian context, people have been using fuel wood for cooking. But
Correct.
fuel is something which is not sustainable because, one, you're cutting the forest because you're increasing more pressure on the forest ecosystem, and which is crucial
Correct.
for building climate resilience, climate change adaptation, and also carbon emission reduction.
Hmm.
So, thereby introducing something like low carbon and energy efficient cook stove,
Hmm.
you are able to reduce the pressure, reduce carbon emission, and also develop certain amount of uh, improve health quality, air quality in the kitchen atmosphere. And
Hmm.
plus, it is also in some cases, like for example, one of the work that we have initiated, that we are also trying to link it with skill development opportunities, so that local people are able to develop and install these devices locally with locally available raw materials, and plus generate a long-term livelihood opportunity for themselves.
So
And
this is one of the what you're talking about, efficient fuel in terms of the cooking mechanisms that can be utilized, and this is one of those that you have developed, right? And that
uh,
you're also giving, I think, training to the youth for them to be able to build these.
Exactly. So this is a technology that we have learned and borrowed through collaboration from Indian Institute of Sciences. They have this department of called Center for Sustainable Technologies, specialized in developing and propagating sustainable technologies for cooking, heating, and all sorts of things for drying agro producers. So we have learned that these and through technological collaborations with them, and have been able to also promote and propagate at them at the local level through training of master trainers, training of local youths, community members who would be trained by the experts from Indian Institute of Sciences, and they are able to then take it forward at the local level. So
Yeah,
which
this is
is
a very interesting and a key, in-depth kind of somebody who is into it at the deepest level would understand that it is not just about creating this kind of technology, which is very simple, but it is also important to utilize locally available material A and locally available talent to build it, right? Like yesterday in our conversation, you mentioned that while we can mass produce it and it may, be cost effective for us, and it may have a larger impact in terms of us writing that we have produced so many and sent it across from one part of the country to the other part of the country, but essentially it will be adding to the carbon footprint. So what is the point of doing something like that?
right.
And then to be able to address this challenge that locally जो youth हैं उनको हम उनको
Engage करें, train
सिखा के
करें.
influence करके और उनकी livelihood एक opportunity उनको दें. So I think that's a very 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 intrinsic and a very good way of approaching this, rather than just like greenwashing, right? A lot of people
Absolutely.
may
We are
do a
trying
lot
to
of,
walk the talk.
yeah, walking the talk. You also mentioned that you're into restoring water bodies, etc., as well, and I think I can show one of the pictures here where yes, this is somewhere close to Noida.
Yes. So this is a collaborative initiative along with a couple of more like-minded organizations, and also support received from our corporate partners, as well as Ghaziabad Municipal Corporation. This is actually in Ghaziabad. So
So
we are
what is
able
it
to and
basically, how do you do it?
yeah, and there are initiatives like this happening across various parts of the country in and of course, fortunately, we are one of them to be able to promote this, because this is very, very critical. This is not only critical for our water security, but also for climate security, and something that I'm purposefully, intentionally using this word climate security, because as we are experiencing these change called climate change, and which is not good for the environment, not good for human life and other flora and fauna. But and if we are able to bring in create a conducive environment, then probably we can have a climate which is secure and good enough for all of our survival. So this is being done manually. This is being the the water bodies, they are disappearing. They're disappearing for a number of causes. Maybe encroachment is definitely one of them. Then also misuse, sometimes, biological uh, processes that lead to a death of a water body like ponds and lakes. So they are being restored with physical endeavors like, digging, cleaning, then restoration of the embankments, then you plant trees around, then also introduce useful flora which can survive and also help purify the water later, because there are a lot of plants that we also use. They are known to be purifiers, natural purifiers. Like, for example, you use a lot of plants, indoor plants these days, which are considered as air purifier. Similarly, we also have plants, aquatic plants. They can work as water purifier. So at least the organic contaminants which is prevalently available in water bodies like this can be treated to a large extent by means of uh, these plants, aquatic plants. So
Super.
this is yeah.
Have you also worked on the river Yamuna? Because every time I cross the Kalindi Kunj, and so many times I notice, I think there is effluence of the dyeing company that is completely, dumped there. I don't know. There are no restrictions on that, and all that you can see sometimes is just foam. Or for that matter, when there is Chhat Puja, then also, I could see while you praying to the sun, the ladies are literally in that foam water. There is hardly anything which is left there as far as the river is concerned. So I hope that, maybe you or organizations like yours can also focus on that, because I've seen a lot of people making a lot of noise and really doing nothing.
Fortunately, yes, I have had some very good experience of associating with the river Yamuna, especially during my times in the Energy and Resources Institute, which is a very well-known institute and shortly known as TERI in Delhi. So while I was in TERI, I was handling a major component of Yamuna Action Plan Phase 2, which used to be a flagship program of Government of India, Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change, that endeavored to bring in a lot of changes at the grassroots level by promoting sustainable behavior, by generating awareness, sensitizing communities, and also promoting the use of appropriate technologies which are, like, for example, you mentioned about dye that has been in the news of late, and especially not just Yamuna but also a tributary of Yamuna, which is Hindan, and which is unfortunately is also dying, and which is in a very bad state as I speak now. And the the dyeing industries or units in the fringes of River Hindon, they would dispose the colored water into the river straight away without even considering the need for treatment, and which is of course wrong, which is also happening. It happens for two reasons primarily. One is, of course, lack of awareness, which is very common in a society like India. Of course, general awareness is there that this is wrong and this should not have been happening. But awareness to the extent that this is happening because of this, and this can be the wrong which has happened can also be undone by certain means. That solution part, people are not aware about solution, and people are not sensitive towards that, that I can also bring about that change. So uh, one, of course, we need a very robust enforcement system. Of course, the law is already there. We have agencies like Pollution Control Board, but sometimes, due to the oversight or lack of proper monitoring mechanism, these units or smaller industries, they continue to flout. And I keep emphasizing one factor, one thing, for the fact that sometimes we have a tendency of neglecting, say, this is a small industry, how much pollution it can probably emit, right? But if you put together a number of smaller units, polluting units, and think about the cumulative impact it can have. It could be probably bigger than
Right.
a large industry. So
Right.
that's something we should always factor in, and then treat them equally. That every industry, polluting industry, whether small or big, it can have a long-term negative impact on our environment. And this
So
is something.
the fact that despite that there are there is a kind of maybe a fine also, but people are still flouting or finding ways of just putting in the trash into the Yamuna, and that's the reason why we're at this state. So how do you feel? Maybe like you're saying, in terms of awareness, in terms of simple solutions, like you said, there are air purifiers for the air in terms of plants. Planting plants which can purify the polluted river. Is that what is also required? And how does one go about it?
Uh, when the river is polluted with industrial effluent, it is
Hmm.
kind of it becomes a very difficult situation, and the level of intervention required goes up. Like, for
Hmm.
example, the water which is like domestic sewage water can be treated with plants like that I had mentioned. Like, for example, Canna indica, which is a very popular vetiver grass. These are very popularly known and used for treating or purifying domestic sewage water or municipal sewage water, but they cannot be a replacement for sewage treatment plant when it comes to industrial sewage, because industrial sewage carries a lot of chemical contaminants. So it has to have that proper treatment mechanism, and it becomes a responsibility of the polluting industry to have in-house mechanism to treat whatever effluent they are releasing, right? So that again, it comes to the enforcement agencies to ensure that these treatment plants are in place. And of course, now coming back to, I keep emphasizing and keep coming back to the importance, the role that we have to play as a responsible citizen, which is very, very critical. It is not only about our own individual behavior. There's just something that I have been a big fan of, something which has been propagated by Bharat Sokakakai, which is a very well known socio-cultural organization. So they are promoting this concept of sustainable human behavior, which is aligned with sustainable development goals. And they're saying, if we want sustainability all around, in a sustainability in our environment, that our behavior also has to be sustainable. So one, of course, our individual responsibility would be to become sustainable in our behavior, but and collectively we also need to be the ears and eyes and ears of these, for these government agencies who are responsible for enforcement. Because sometimes, like I said, it is an oversight. Sometimes they do not have a mechanism to monitor each and every industry, right? So that times it is our collective responsibility that we become the voice of the river, and convey that the river is, or the water body is going through such and such
No, that is
difficulty.
fine what you're saying. So are you saying, as an individual citizen, I can also voice this opinion? How am I going to voice this opinion? Where am I going to go?
I feel, of course, there are appropriate forums, but social media, I strongly believe in the power of social media. One single tweet can have a very, very powerful impact, and something that I have been experiencing on a regular basis. I use Twitter on a regular basis to convey my grievances to the appropriate authorities. Sometimes, like for example, I live in Noida. I keep seeing issues with and sewage discharge, cleanliness, road safety. And the moment I see it, I click a photo, I put it on social media, and it's being taken care of. It's been instantly responded by the authorities. So, which is and something we should do, because we let's not forget, the social media forums are there for our benefit, and we should be able to use them judiciously to also help the environment.
Sure. Okay, so two aspects we've touched upon. One, of course, is the fuel efficiency, utensils that you are not only kind of producing, but also helping in livelihood of the locals there to avoid the carbon footprint of its travel also. The second is restoring natural bodies, whether it's ponds, lakes, etc. And third, I think you also mentioned that you're into food and nutrition as well.
Right.
And through COVID, I think you've done some phenomenal work of how many lakh of rotis did you provide in 58
Yeah,
days?
I was part of a major campaign that happened in Noida region, and it's a collective social and citizen-centric, participatory thing that I have was able to experience during COVID, and something that I have never seen before. A group of volunteers got together to collect rotis from individual households. And in a span of 58 days, the group was able to, and I was very much part of that initiative, was able to collect and distribute more than 18 lakh rotis in a span of
18 lakh
58 days.
rotis in 58
Yes,
days. That's a roti
and
bank.
uh, and this is something, and credit also should be given to the government agencies such as Noida Authority. They came forward to collaborate with us to create a collection and distribution mechanism, because they already had set up those community kitchens across various parts of Noida, and the rotis that were collected across these gated communities and societies were then taken from us to those kitchen and eventually distributed to people, marginalized people, and people who got stranded because of the lockdown.
Correct, correct,
Right.
correct.
Yeah.
And the learnings from there you also kind of utilized in the medicine bank.
Exactly. In fact, that helped us move to a different disaster relief exercise altogether, from COVID to something which is right in the beginning. You mentioned about Assam, which is being a flood prone area. And when we saw that, we already, the world was fighting COVID-19 pandemic, and then the parts of Assam, parts of Bihar was stuck, hit by massive flood, displacing more than 50 million people in a span of few days. So we thought, let's do something about it. Let's do something which can have more meaningful contribution to flood relief exercise, because sometimes collecting, we are able to collect many things, but the distribution becomes a challenge, last mile delivery. So here we are able to, following that same mechanism, we reached out to people, individuals, saying, if you have unused and non-expired medicines lying with you in your house, if you want to give it away, you can donate it to us. And that's how we build a collection mechanism, and those collected medicines were then sorted, packed properly, and then delivered to far-flung areas of Assam, and with local level collaboration there. Like, for example, Red Cross Society of Morigao district, which is again my home district, they came forward and they set up, series of medicine health checkup camps to help the flood affected people, and used our medicine to distribute them for free of cost.
Yes, yes,
Right.
yes. This brings us to this very important aspect in our conversation and what the country is facing today on its western coast with the tropical cyclone Biparjoy.
Biporjoy.
Biporjoy itself is a word, is an Assamese word or a Bengali word that spells disaster, right? From Bipada
True.
in Hindi,
True.
right?
Yeah.
Now, you know, with what I'm hearing from you, there's a lot of reactive kind of relief which we're talking about. That something like this has happened, something like this has been continuously happening in Assam where you grew up, with the Bhagirathi there. Um, but every time it hits, every time, there is a kind of a collection all across the country to support the farmers or to support the fishermen who are right next to the banks. And then since their livelihood is connected with this, so for the next, before the next floods, again they're back there and again they're dislodged. And and so while we can provide them evacuation, while we can provide them food or shelter or medicines as a reactive measure, But now we have to live with this, and this will happen in different parts of the country now, different parts of the world now. This is not an anomaly that happens, or it used to happen only in Assam. It is now, something that will happen, and more so. So, what are the proactive ways in which an individual, a community, an organization like yours, and at the government level, kind of become resilient or handle something like this?
Uh, Disasters of this sort is not one off anymore. We are likely to experience more of Biporjoy like situations in the coming in the new future. In climate change, from the climate change perspective, there's this term that we frequently use called extreme weather events, and this is nothing but, you know, the climate change induced disasters, whether it is in the form of flood, extreme, torrential rain, or extreme heat, or maybe drought kind of situations on floods of Assam, which is primarily being induced by the river Brahmaputra, which is a mighty, mighty river. And so these kind of situations are going to only increase. And if you look at the latest report studies undertaken at the global level or the national level, whether it is the study of IPCC Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, or the local studies undertaken by IIT Guwahati, IIT Mandi, or Indian Institute of Sciences, that looked at the increasing vulnerability of places like the northeastern India. So
Correct.
that only indicates that, in the coming days we are likely to experience more of these situations, and more vulnerability, and more unpredictability with the weather pattern. So
Correct. Correct.
obviously, we do not have a choice but to remain prepared, like you said. Of course, every time we talk about uh, the disaster preparedness, we talk about both proactive preparedness as well as reactive preparedness. But sometimes it is extremely difficult if it is so unpredictable. You cannot be proactively prepared. Then you need to have a set of reactive mechanism to be able to deal with, when you are hit by a flood or things like Biporjoy. So that's going to be the key. And on the way forward that I see, it's going to be a collaborative effort between the citizens collective, the civil society organizations, NGOs, government agencies, academic institutions, research institutions, to be able to work out on better solutions and ensure implement at the last, at the ground level. And that can only happen through adoption of better lifestyle, adoption of, like, for example, low carbon and energy efficient devices for cooking, or something like that, or climate resilient or climate smart agriculture practices that will allow you to grow food, grow grains, grow paddy, even when your land is inundated with water, right?
Really? Is that
Yes,
already in process?
already in place, and that it is successfully being done. In fact, fortunately, in places like Assam, which has already been known to have floods, annual floods, I mean, since time immemorial, we have had certain varieties of boro rice, bao rice. These varieties were known to be flood resilient, but now, of course, the intensity of flood has increased, and it has become so unpredictable. So institutions such as Assam Agriculture University, with support from Indian Council of Agricultural Research, and local institutions, all the Krishi Vigyan Kendras, they're working further to be able to develop more better varieties, which are more climate resilient, more resilient to flood, more they like, for example, the just recently I was in Assam, and I was talking to a group of farmers and promoters of a farmer producer company in Morigaon, So they said, there are rice varieties available. As the water level grows, they also continue to grow. So that means the flood will never be able to, destroy them. So which is good, because we do not have a choice anymore. So we only think that we can will help us survive the situation is to by adopting alternatives, by adopting to better technology, by adopting um, smart agriculture system. And also, like for example, this photograph that the earlier photograph, we will have to continue to grow forest, plant trees, because trees are a natural solution and natural best answer to climate change. Because climate change, the one of the critical factor that contributor is the carbon emission, and trees can capture carbon naturally, atmospheric carbon. So that's key, apart from all other benefits, like it controls the local microclimatic condition. Like that means if you enter into a forested area, you feel sudden change in temperature, right? So that is called micro temperature condition. So the forest has the ability to help control the temperature, also capture carbon, and also in the long run, if you look at it from the commercial forestry kind of it is a source of revenue for the country as well as
So,
for the local
so
people.
what I'm hearing from you, as simple as it sounds, it essentially is just planting more trees, that will bind the soil, that will give more oxygen, that will reduce the carbon emissions, and also research in terms of seeds which are resilient to floods, say for example. And it's heartening to hear that the wisdom of the land of Assam to begin with itself had these kind of field seeds of rice that are resilient to floods, but because the intensity of floods is so much now, that there is more research that needs to happen. And farmers need to probably adapt to these kind of seeds and this kind of agriculture, because they're the ones who are going to be hit the most. And
Exactly.
from a governmental perspective, is there some work happening to identify these vulnerable zones across the country?
Yes, there are efforts both at the government level as well as at the behest of several academic and research institutions. They are mapping the vulnerable areas. They are putting on a scale to understand the risk of these areas if they are to hit by situations like this, or the impact of climate change. And accordingly, the suggestions and recommendations are being put forward. In fact, some places recently I have come to know that the government is also taking initiative to create highlands or shelters for people to come and take a temporary refuge when they are hit by floods. Both, I mean, the people as well as their livestock. So these kind of interventions are going to be critical. This is something like, if I can talk about from a wildlife conservation perspective, the creation of highland has been in practice for a long, long time. Like for example, Kaziranga National Park, which is
Correct.
it's a globally renowned national park for its rhinos and all other animals. So there, many places, the highlands are being created so that the animals can take shelter during floods. And similarly, similar efforts are also being done for people, flood-affected people, to take shelter. And also, shelters are also created. One is highland, of course, it's an earthen island, highland, and the other thing is the shelters, elevated shelters, so that people can be there during the floods until the water is receded.
Mm.
So this kind of efforts are going to be critical. It's like I said, it's a combination of both proactive and reactive approach. We
Sure.
cannot just rely on one approach, and cannot just rely on one agency or one entity.
Correct.
All like-minded people and institutions, people like us, the institutions such as Global Foundation and all other local, regional, national organizations will have to come together to ensure that we have best adaptation measures to overcome the impact of climate change.
Thank you so much, Dr. Patar, for taking out time to speak with us. And we hope to see more of your work, maybe in the climate resilient field, so that we can recognize that through SABERA as well, and make it available as part of knowledge to other organizations such as yourselves, and help catalyze ESG and SDG development in the country. Thank you so much for taking the time.
Thank you once again. I'm hugely honored to be on this show today. Thank you, and have a good day.
All right. Bye-bye.